That's not working.
I'm having the same issue with my mic as well.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairwoman, and thank you to all the planning board members who made themselves available tonight for this special hearing to adopt the fourth round housing element and fair share plan. I am Dan Haubin, the affordable housing planning consultant for Verona Township from DMR Architects, and I prepared the affordable housing plan for the township with a great deal of help from the board members, council members, Ms. Siobhan, your administrator, Kevin O'Sullivan, and Jamie Platchek, the attorney who's not here at the moment. So before we talk about the specifics of the plan, I'm just going to give the public some history about affordable housing in New Jersey and understand why we are where we are tonight. So New Jersey has effectively had an affordable housing system for about 50 years. Back in 1975, it heard a case that the New Jersey Supreme Court heard a case that's now referred to as Mount Laurel 1, in which the Supreme Court determined that every municipality has to provide a realistic opportunity for the provision of housing that is affordable to low and moderate income households and individuals, regardless of how large or small they are. This was reaffirmed in a separate case 8 years later in 1983. That case, called Mount Laurel 2, spurred the state legislature to, in 1985, adopt an act called the Fair Housing Act of New Jersey, which created a body called COA, the Council on Affordable Housing, whose responsibility, according to the act, was to set rules and enforce the creation of affordable housing across every town in the state. The act had a important provision called the Builder's Remedy Provision, or exclusionary zoning provision, which stated that any municipality that did not comply with the rules or provide a realistic opportunity for affordable housing could subject itself to a litigation brought by a builder, which, if successful, would essentially override the municipality's zoning powers, allow the builder to build something on their property that they had control over, which is substantially larger than what the zoning would allow, as long as they provided some affordable housing, which is part of the reason why we're here tonight. We want to avoid that kind of thing happening here. So just some history on COA. It had made some rules effectively and enforced them effectively for about 13 years, from 1987 to 1999, when it created what we call the first and second round rules and enforced those rules. It then failed several times to adopt what are called the third round rules from 2000 to 2014. During that time, they had adopted some rules, and then they were struck down by the various courts in the state. And in 2015, in the 2014, they tried one last time to adopt rules. They failed to adopt those rules, and then failed to vote to meet again to try again to adopt those rules, and effectively ending their reign in affordable housing. In 2015, there was another case before a Supreme Court called Mount Laurel 4. It brought by Fair Share Housing Center, who said that every town should be complying with their affordable housing obligation, even in the absence of COA. The Supreme Court agreed, and that's why in 2021, the Verona adopted or entered into a settlement agreement with Fair Share Housing Center that who at that point had basically taken on the role of COA to determine what Verona's affordable housing obligations were and how we were going to meet them. I wrote the third round affordable housing plan that we adopted 2 years ago, almost to the day in 2023. And that was to satisfy obligations that were determined for what we're now calling the third round, which ends in, what are we at? In 13 days, more or less, right? And now we are in the fourth round. So the fourth round rules were created by a bill signed by Governor Murphy on March 20th, 2024. the bill amended the Fair Housing Act to set a new set of rules for the next 10 years and beyond. Part of those rules were require the township and every municipality to adopt a housing plan that meets the affordable housing need that we've been assigned not later than June 30th. If we don't adopt this plan before June 30th, then we open ourselves up to builder's remedy litigation, which, as I said, allows developers to exceed the zoning standards on their property in order to provide affordable housing, supposedly. So what are our affordable housing obligations? So there's something called the prospective need. That is something that is determined every 10 years, and it stacks. So your prospective need, you have to, even though we've addressed our prospective need for the period, the third round period that ends in 2 weeks, we now have a new prospective need that we have to plan for the next 10 years. And so the state had determined that our obligation for the next 10 years was 173, was to create 173 affordable units. We looked at their methodology for coming to that number. We determined that they had missed some things. They were using outdated data. We were able to bring that number down to 155 units through settlements that were approved by the courts. There's also something called the present need that actually resets every 10 years, unlike the prospective need, which builds every 10 years. So that's a number of existing units in town that are occupied by low-income people that, do you want to borrow that? Okay. That are in substandard condition, and we would have to provide funds for those households to rehabilitate their homes, to bring them to code. Fortunately, this round, we don't have an obligation for that. Our number is 0, so we don't actually have to plan for that. Also, fortunately for Verona, we are a largely built-out town, and what that means is that we can take advantage of something called the vacant land adjustment, in which we take a look at the land in town that is vacant, unused, undeveloped, or unused, undeveloped, and determine how much affordable housing it could theoretically accommodate. You don't actually have to plan or build on those properties. It's a purely academic or theoretical exercise. And what we determined was that the township really only can accommodate 57 affordable units over the next 10 years. However, the statute does require you to plan for, rather, the interpretation that we're understanding and taking for this and following for this plan to protect ourselves from potential litigation is the interpretation that you still have to plan for 25% of that difference between that 155 and the 57 units that we determined in our vacant land analysis. 25% of that difference is 25. So instead of planning for 155 units, this plan actually planned for 82 units. But there's another factor to that. And actually, let me back up because I'm getting ahead of the PowerPoint. How do you create affordable housing? So there's the predominant way is through something called inclusionary development, in which a private developer builds a multi-unit housing development, and 15 to 20% of the units in that development have to be affordable to low and moderate income households. You can also work with group home providers for adults with special needs, or use municipal funds to create a 100% affordable project similar to the Verona Flats down the street. Something that's important to understand is that up to 25% of the RDP, which is the 57 units that we determined the vacant land in town can accommodate, can be met with what's called bonus credits. So of the 57 units that we had to plan for, 14 of them are really just counting some units twice. And then the remaining 43 are actual units that we've planned for in this plan. Now, on this slide is the compliance plan that is included in the housing plan, and it lays out all the projects that we have included in the plan in order to create the 57 affordable units and or bonus credits to meet our obligation. And that includes using the TCMU Town Center Mixed Use Overlay Zone that was adopted as part of the third round settlement agreement, even though it wasn't needed for your third round number. We were able to bring that in this round. You basically set yourselves up to have 11 affordable units in your plan before we even started this process. The C2 zone was amended to allow for assisted living on property, an existing industrial property on Grove Avenue that can accommodate about 25 affordable units, but due to certain limits in how many age-restricted units you can include in your plan, we are only counting 5 of those. The township has been working with the developer to redevelop 320 Bloomfield Avenue for a total of 12 housing units, of which 2 of those would be affordable, and we are eligible for one bonus credit from that project. There's also a redevelopment of the Hillcrest Farms property that's in negotiation, which at the moment is anticipated to provide for 33 total units, of which 4 of those would be special needs bedrooms for adults with special needs, and 1 would be a 3-bedroom family unit for low-income households. There's a negotiations in process for the redevelopment of 420 Bloomfield Avenue, also known as the Richfield Regency site, where there will be a minimum of 45 units on that site, which would produce a minimum of 7 affordable units, which are also eligible for bonus credits. I'm sorry, not the borough, I apologize. The township is also negotiating with 176 Bloomfield for a multi-unit project that would have 28 total units, of which 4 would be affordable, also eligible for bonuses. Negotiating with the owner of 855 to 885 Bloomfield Avenue for a project that would have a minimum of 19 units, and of which 4 would be affordable at least, and half of those may be for adults with special needs in partnership with a group home provider. And then there's still about 100 leftover units at the Hillwood senior Section 8 senior housing project up the road, that of which we're claiming 8 toward our obligation. So again, that's a site that existed that we're using affordable units from toward this round's obligation because we're allowed to, because it'll continue to exist for the next 10 years. So I mentioned several times that the township's been in negotiations with these developers, and that's just sort of a peek into how we've kind of arrived at this list, which is, the township has been in discussions with property owners and developers for this year, through this year and earlier, and try to come up with the best deal for the municipality and the residents, while also protecting itself from these builders' remedy lawsuits. And your planner and I have also worked to identify zoning opportunities that also helped us get to this point. So I mentioned before that we have to also provide for 25 additional units on top of that vacant land, adjusted number of 57 units, and the way we're handling that is by eliminating a current rule in the TC zone, your town center zone, which encompasses the area immediately around your municipal building, to remove a rule that currently limits residential to 50% of the gross square footage of any multi-story building in that zone, which limits developers from providing what's usually the standard mix of 2 residential stories over 1 commercial story in a mixed-use development. So removing that barrier, we believe, should help us address that 25 additional unit need. And just an understanding of what else is involved in the housing plan, we are required to provide demographic and economic data, including projections of what changes may occur over the next decade, and a lot of that typically relies on existing data sources such as the U.S. Census and the North Jersey Transportation Planning Authority, who is the regional metropolitan planning organization that has a lot of data about your region that includes projecting growth over the next, I think, 25 years. We're required to identify lands that had come to our attention in preparing this plan, whether or not they were included in the plan, assessing whether there's enough adequate water and sewer capacity to accommodate the number of units provided for in the plan, prepare a spending plan, which is handled by the Township Council, as well as draft ordinance. This is also handled by the Township Council that lay out how the plan will be effectively implemented. But for our purposes tonight, the focus is to adopt the housing element and fair share plan and make sure that we meet that June 30th deadline. What happens after the adoption is there's a 48-hour window where we have to upload the plan to the state. There's a 2-month window where developers or a advocacy group like Fair Share Housing Center could potentially challenge our plan if they find it to be non-compliant with the Fair Housing Act, which I don't predict to be the case. And should anybody be successful, though, in challenging the plan, we have until December 31st to resolve their challenges. We also have, should anything change on our end, including identification of better opportunities to address our housing obligation or resolution of the number of units on a particular site, we have the ability to amend our plan. It's a living document. It's not, we're not completely bound to what is in this document. And any projects that are in this plan have to come before the board anyway. They have to come before the board for review, similar to how any other development would come before the board. So just because they're in this plan doesn't mean they're magically going to appear without any sort of oversight. You have an administrative agent who will be responsible for making sure that the affordable units created in Verona are occupied by the actual qualified households, making sure that they're not trying to profit off of their units, making sure that they're the correct number of people in each unit. So there's a whole system in place for making sure that this is implemented in a fair and organized process. So I think I'm going to leave it there and open it up to questions from the board and from the public, I guess, afterward.
Before we do that, can you just bring back up the distribution chart a couple pages back?
Sure.
And can you
This one?
re-explain how that chart contains 57 units for the RDP, but we're supposed to have 82?
So, yes.
Can you just explain that a little better?
Yeah, so these projects have the number of units and bonus credits that add up to actually 59, just because if we were to be short one physical unit, we end up actually losing more bonuses and have to cut out a senior unit, I think, which would have brought us to 56 units instead of 57. So we're kind of forced into having more units in the plan. But the other 25 units that we talked about, your planner, Sanjivan, had done an analysis of how many units could be developed in the TC zone if you were to remove the 50% split provision that you currently have. And I had taken a look at the numbers, and if you remove that and they were fully developed, in theory, they could produce enough units to support 27 affordable units. So the thing about this extra 25% is that no one is holding you to having those units created. It's historically akin to what in the previous rounds was called the unmet need, which is more of a passive obligation. It's something that you have to create an opportunity for, but if they were to not to be built in the next 10 years, you're not penalized. It just provides a sort of an ongoing eternal opportunity for creating affordable units in the township.
So Dan,
yeah.
In the TCMU overlay, I know that there are modifications coming to the TC zone.
Yes.
So that number, 11 credits at the top of that chart for the overlay, that's going to expand to the entirety of town center, in a sense, and then the number will grow, presumably.
It's going to be two separate things because the TCMU zone has a 22-unit acre density, whereas what we'd be talking about for the rest of the town center zone would only be 10 units an acre. I mean, if in theory, yes, this table probably would be easier to understand if I added an additional row and just said the town center amendment and then showed the 25 units, and then you sort of understand.
So is it necessary to add the presumption of 25 additional units coming from town center due to the forthcoming update to the zoning code in the town center zone to show this chart compliant with the 82 units that we necessitate rather than above 59,
Just want
equal-
to make sure I'm understanding. Are you asking if it's necessary for us to protect ourselves, for me to add it to the?
Well, my question is, if we need 82 units
Yeah.
and I only see, greater than 59,
Okay.
what keeps us compliant?
Yeah.
What is the rock bottom number that keeps us compliant insofar as the plan?
Right. So in the plan document itself, there is this table that shows the 59, and then
Right.
there's a separate section that explains that there is this this amendment coming to address what we're calling the unmet need. So what protects us is that the plan states that this is what we're doing. Whether it's in this table or separated is kind of irrelevant from a compliance perspective. Typically it's cleaner in these plans to separate the satisfaction of the RDP from the unmet need, just because they're technically two different things. Does that answer the question?
It does.
Okay.
And I appreciate that, and I just want to also, for the edification of everybody here, having a requirement to produce 82 units means basically 82 times 5 or 6.
Yes.
Because you're talking about, that's 15 to 20% of the total units that will be created in the township
Right.
over the next 10 years. With that, I'd like to jump over to Jeremy. Start with you, if you have any questions. Okay. Jesse?
I know we just went through the last round, and that seemed like it was just, yesterday.
Yeah.
So can you explain a little bit, like, why they're so close to each other? And then I believe you said the next round will be 10 years from
Yeah.
now. So why wasn't there a 10-year gap between?
So the reason that everything is so close to each other is because technically, each round is supposed to be 10 years, and technically this round, that third round that we're talking about, started in 2015. However, the courts left everybody with very little guidance on how they're supposed to determine what their number is, and then how they're actually supposed to comply with that number in a legal way. So Verona, as well as a lot of other towns, sort of entered into a negotiation process with the entity Fair Share Housing Center, who is sort of the reason that the court got involved in the first place. And for some towns that took years. Some towns were able to negotiate immediately, and their plans for that round were adopted in 2016. And Verona and some other towns only just got to their plans in the last few years. So it's just sort of a fact of how long the negotiations took, and I think there may have been some other litigation that had slowed things down in that stage. That contributed to how long it took. So it's really just about how long the settlement negotiations took and whatever other else was going on.
And just to confirm, the next round will be in 2035.
That's correct. The next round is in 2035. There is, as long as we're talking about what the next 10 years is going to look like, there is a midpoint review period in 2030, where essentially by, I think it's June 30th of 2030, you're going to have to look at your plan and see what has progress been made on these projects, and if not, does the township have to make changes to the plan to make those projects more realistic or replace them? Is a developer that you thought was going to be doing something, kind of have they dropped out, has no one filled in their shoes, has a zone that you created not incentivized developers enough? So there is in 5 years, you are going to have to look at it again, if not sooner. As I mentioned, it's a living document, and you can, within certain limitations, revisit the plan as needed. But yes, the next round starts in 10 years. But there are these humps in the middle.
Thank you.
I don't have any questions.
Census data go into these calculations?
The census data goes into how the state determines what your number is, which is what we worked down from. The vacant land analysis is based purely on what the township actually looks like at the time that the analysis is done.
Okay. Because, it goes up, but it's kind of declining. And so says at least just what I found online
What's
right
that?
now. Our census data is declining. And it goes up, I think, a couple hundred people over the 10 years. It's not like people are rushing to Verona or leaving it.
Right.
So I'm just wondering, Madam Chair, to your point, if we're getting 5 other units, is there enough people for all of these apartments, affordable or otherwise, that implicated on the town here?
enough people for the apartments?
Yeah, I know there's enough people. Talk about are we meeting the needs of the entire population or over meeting it?
Yeah, that's sort of a whole other conversation, right? Just to sort of give a little bit more context, the numbers are not based on, the calculations from the state aren't based on projections, they're based on how many new low and moderate income households were created in New Jersey over the last decade. And the presumption is, which is confirmed by other research, that the affordable housing stock is well below the stock needed. So in theory, yeah, if the stock is, if there's as much need as there is, yeah, they'll probably be occupied, but
Okay.
I understand where you're coming from, yeah.
Okay, but that doesn't have bearing on our votes
No.
or decisions.
No.
All right, thank you.
No comments.
No comments.
No comments. This is just for the public's edification. We're not making comments or asking questions. Mr. O'Sullivan and I have heard this presentation twice, and we'll hear it again for
You're gonna
the
hear it
third
again.
time on Monday. So
I just wanted to illuminate a couple of
Yes.
things because it gets a little confusing.
yeah, the
So-
council's heard.
Yes.
Just we don't want you to think that we're not asking questions
It's
because
also confusing to the practitioners who've been doing this for 10 or more years.
Do you have
No.
any clarifications? Okay, so at this time, I'm going to
To open to public questions. You can ask our experts the questions. You just come to the mic, state your name and your township or municipality where you live, and go ahead.
Okay. Glasses. I have a written comment that I'll read if I can see it. Okay.
If you don't have questions, we're going to ask comments to be just before the vote. We're just, if there might not be any. If there are no other just hold on one second. If there are no other questions, you have a question, please come up.
Hi.
Hi.
My name's Lauren Ramaka. I'm a Verona resident. I wasn't as involved in this in the last round.
Can you
so-
come closer to the microphone?
Oh, sorry.
on?
Apologize if this is repetitive. It's not on.
It's not on.
Can you hear me?
I don't think so.
Can you hear me without it?
I can hear you, it's just, I don't know if they need it for the record.
Oh, okay.
Should be.
Over here, I can't see it. I don't know how to. That's not what it might. Here. Okay, thank you. My name's Lauren Ramaka. I'm a Verona resident, and I wasn't as involved in the last round of this, so apologize if this is repetitive. I don't see any analysis in this of the impact to the schools, particularly the elementary schools. And like the TCMU district, I think would be in the Forest Avenue Elementary School, as was the Verona Flats. So is that taken into consideration here?
No.
And if so, why not?
Unfortunately, it's not. It's not included in the state's determination or analysis of how what the number should be, and we're not allowed to pick and choose projects based on or not comply with the number based on a concern about school children. It's just not permitted by the law.
But like as the town, can we determine what sections of towns we allow for this development?
I can respond on
Yeah,
the school
thank
piece.
you.
The Verona Board of Education has a policy for districting of the elementary schools, whereby simply when people move in who have not been established in the school system, they can be placed in any school.
Okay.
So right now, for Verona Flats, the students would naturally go to FN Brown. That's where Verona Flats would go. Normally, people don't cross Bloomfield Avenue but that's changing a little bit. Based on need, they could go there. FN Brown offers some certain special ed services, English as second language, things like that. So sometimes with affordable housing development, there is also a rise in need for things in those areas. Not necessarily, but it can happen, right? But they can place students in whatever classroom in whatever building has the lowest numbers. They are allowed to do that. It's obviously not optimal for them to do that, but they have that ability. But as Mr. Halvin said, we're in we have to follow the state guidelines. We can't necessarily do anything. And our problem in Verona, one of them is just we don't have land to develop, right? We have to, and the areas that we've been talking about are substantive changes in those places. So we really are limited to the actual areas that we can develop. And if you look at the table, they're all either along Bloomfield Avenue or on a corner of town on Grove Avenue, in order to make sure that we can maintain the character of the residential neighborhoods, which if we don't meet this could dramatically change if there were a builder's remedy lawsuit. So that's why they're in these particular areas.
I have a second question on that. Thank you for that explanation. I appreciate that. My second question is, I did notice that a lot of, do we max out? How many rounds of these are there? Because I do feel like Bloomfield Avenue is already so congested. I live close to the Verona Flats. I've noticed a significant difference in traffic since they've opened. So, is this every 10 years? Is there a point where we're going to run out of space?
Yeah, it's going to happen until the sun explodes and we all, yeah, as far, unless there is a change in the legislature makes a change to how it's done, the rules passed by the governor last year's anticipate another several rounds. So,
okay. Thank you.
And just to add to that,
Yeah.
what the mayor said and what Dan said, that they don't take regular infrastructural questions into consideration on any of this. So with that, they don't look at our administration for our town, our township building space, our police force, our fire and rescue departments, and the increase in need that the town will have, our road infrastructure. None of it is taken into consideration for this constitutional requirement. Does it make sense? No. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Charlie Gruet. I live in Verona. For this compliance plan chart here, I just need some clarification because I'm confused still. But when I look at these numbers, there's 372 total units, and then total credits 59. 59 of 372 is about 15%. So how does that meet our 25%? Or I'm confused about the percentages because to me that seems low. Why are we building so many units and not making more affordable units to comply?
So it averages out to about 15% because when somebody builds a rental project, The standard is that 15% of those units have to be affordable. The 25% is something different. The 25% is, I mentioned that the state assigned number that we have is 155 units, but we did an analysis where we said the land can only accommodate 57 units, right? So the statute says that, the statute is very poorly written, but the interpretation that we've taken to protect ourselves is that we have to plan for redevelopment of a currently developed land that would provide for 25% of the difference between 57 and 55. So that's 98 units. Quarter of that is rounding up because you have to, is 25 units. So that's a 25. So the 25% is not 25% of 372. It's 25% of 98, totally different number. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it kind of does. Thank you.
Yeah.
I guess I have one follow-up question to the woman that was just up here. So she asked, like, when does this end?
Yeah.
I guess, and you said never.
Yeah.
And so that is a good question, because if there is only so much land here and that land gets built upon and developed,
Yeah.
then what? Like, how do we, like, who do I contact outside of this room to make changes? Because, like, that seems like ridiculous, to be quite honest with you.
Your legislator, yeah.
So in theory, 10 years from now, all this land could be built up, all these units could be built, but then we would still need to have a requirement to have more building done?
Well, there are mechanisms in the statute and in the regulations interpreting the statute that take that into account. Like Mr. Howden said, we're applying a vacant land adjustment to bring our obligation from 157 units down to 57 units, and that 100 that we are not planning for becomes unmet need. Now, there are some municipalities that have prepared plans that have utilized vacant land adjustments that say their obligation is 0 because they're fully built out. Will those survive scrutiny? We'll see. But that is theoretically possible under the regulation, so it has been taken into account.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from anybody? Okay, seeing none. Ms. Gray.
Hi, I'm Michelle Brouet. I live in Verona. Dear members of the Verona Planning Board, I'm writing to submit public comment on the 4th round housing element and fair share plan, HEFSP, under discussion at your June 19th, 2025 meeting. While I support the need for Verona to meet its affordable housing obligations under New Jersey law, I am extremely concerned about both the timeline and the substance of the current draft, particularly the inclusion of 855 to 885 Bloomfield Avenue, Block 2205, Lot 6, a 1.77 acre lot to be developed into multiple housing structures with somewhere between 19 and 60 units, offering 2 fully accessible units and 2 affordable housing units. Holding this meeting on this plan just 11 days before the June 30th, 2025 submission deadline is not only irresponsible, it actively excludes meaningful public engagement. The HEFSP is a document that will guide land use, housing, infrastructure, and neighborhood change for the next decade and beyond. When Mayor Christopher Tamburo was running for council in 2021, he said, quote, "I would rather hear from voters before a decision is made, before the second reading of an ordinance, and with some potential time to revise it," end quote. He went on to say, quote, "It's very easy to be transparent. It's a lot harder not to be," end quote. To expect residents to absorb the full content of this draft report and appendices and to submit thoughtful feedback in less than 2 weeks shows a disregard for transparent governance and public input. I respectfully and strongly urge the Planning Board to remove 885 Bloomfield Avenue, Block 2205, Lot 6, from the housing plan. This site is not only physically and environmentally constrained, that has also been the subject of significant public opposition and development hesitation over many years. I, along with hundreds of other residents of Verona, respectfully and strongly urge the Planning Board to redesignate the lot as open space. The Township's own Steep Slope Ordinance, number 3-16, adopted in 2016 and codified in section 150-21 of the Verona Municipal Code, sets specific limits on development in areas with slopes of 15% or greater. The ordinance designates precautionary slopes at 15 to 24.9% and prohibitive slopes at greater than 25%, and places strict limits on disturbance in both categories. The HEFSP acknowledges that a portion of Block 2205 Lot 6 is steeply sloped, yet does not evaluate the extent of this condition or apply the protections of the steep slope ordinance in the report. It includes no required topographic map, no contour analysis, and no slope category calculations as required under section 150-21.8. As Councilman Alex Roman said in 2019 when he was seeking re-election to the Town Council, quote, "I am deeply concerned about the potential for overdevelopment and its impact on the community, and committed to preservation of open space and the character of Verona as a residential community. Early in my term, I worked to establish our steep slope ordinance to prevent developers from cutting into hillsides and otherwise changing the topography of our community to overdevelop. The HEFSP justifies the inclusion of 885 Bloomfield Avenue, Block 2205, Lot 6, by stating that it meets the basic criteria of being available, suitable, developable, and approvable. However, a closer review of the vacant land analysis reveals serious flaws and contradictions in this conclusion. First, while the site is technically available, it suffers from significant physical constraints. The lot is extremely narrow and shallow, with depths ranging from just 84.9 feet to 100 feet, which severely limits its ability to provide appropriate setbacks, circulation, buffering, or on-site stormwater infrastructure. The report notes that the rear of the property is, quote, wooded and sloped, end quote, but fails to evaluate the severity of this condition or its impact on feasible site design. More importantly, this contradicts the township's own historical record. In April of 2019, the then township manager, Matthew Cavallo, explicitly stated to me that the Block 2205 Lot 6 property owner was, quote, not pursuing redevelopment at this time due to the extensive cost of stormwater management to develop the property, end quote. That cost burden has not gone away, and yet the HEFSP presents no engineering analysis to explain how those concerns have been addressed or mitigated. Then, in 2021, when Deputy Mayor Jack McAvoy was running for re-election, he said, quote, in the last 4 years, we instituted several ordinances to protect our environment. I think the latest one was February, our stormwater management ordinance. That was one of my goals, and I talked about it 4 years ago when I got in, end quote. He went on to say, quote, I say we make sure that development that is ongoing in town, or redevelopment for that matter, should become more green as far as the installation of green roofs, and tone down development so that the entire property isn't paved for a parking lot, end quote. One look at Appendix 15, and it appears that the developer's plan is to completely clear cut the wooded lot and replace it with 4 buildings and pavement. This goes against the historical record and values of the Verona Town Council. Back in 2017, when Deputy Mayor McAvoy was running for re-election, he was asked to name one Verona ordinance or regulation that should be eliminated and why. His answer centered around Ordinance 23-16, which defined the new zoning requirements for areas in need of development and lamented that those areas have their own self-supporting zoning ordinances. He went on to say, it begs the question, do we want to line Bloomfield Avenue with oversized apartment buildings? End quote. The values of Verona and our elected representatives are being disregarded with the housing development plans for 885 Bloomfield Ave, Block 2205, Lot 6. Exactly why the lot can and should be redesignated open space. The HEFSP also inconsistently acknowledges that a, quote, portion of the site is believed to be steep slope encumbered, end quote, while simultaneously classifying it as constraint-free in the vacant land analysis. This contradiction undermines the credibility of the site's inclusion. Finally, if a lot with this many constraints is still being counted as developable, it raises a larger concern. Why didn't the township apply more rigorously for a vacant land adjustment? By allowing lots like this to remain in the realistic development potential calculation, the township inflates its housing burden on unsuitable sites rather than focusing development on viable, community-supported parcels. The draft plan already identifies multiple, more appropriate locations for the inclusion of the 2 fully accessible units and 2 affordable housing units, including 320 Bloomfield Avenue and 11 Church Street, 420 Bloomfield Avenue, Richfield Regency Site, Hillcrest Farms, and the Town Center Mixed-Use Overlay Zone. These locations are larger, flatter, and already zoned or planned for housing development. They do not present the same steep terrain or drainage issues. Notably, the HEFSP does not mention or utilize a market to affordable M2A housing strategy, an important and often underused tool for municipalities like Verona with limited undeveloped land, though it was mentioned in an undated document titled Fourth Affordable Housing Round Preliminary Strategy, written by DMR Architects for the Township of Verona. A market to affordable program converts existing market rate homes into deed-restricted affordable housing units, typically through modest public subsidies or negotiated deed restrictions with landlords or property owners. This is a missed opportunity. Even a small-scale M2A program converting 4 to 6 housing units over the planning period could help diversify Verona's compliance strategy while avoiding conflict-prone or physically unsuitable development sites. It would also allow affordable units to be integrated more seamlessly throughout the township's existing neighborhoods, strengthening inclusion and housing choice.
Ms. Goulet,
Yes,
how much longer do you have?
I'm almost done.
Thank you.
I urge the planning board to include a market to affordable strategy as a supplemental mechanism in the HEFSP. In September of 22, 128 Verona residents signed a petition asking this planning board to rezone Block 2205 Lot 6 as open space and to prevent housing development on the site. That letter and petition were also sent to the Verona Township Council. The current draft of the HEFSP makes no mention of this well-documented community opposition. Ignoring it now undermines public trust and devalues resident voices in a process that should be inclusive by design. To put it in another perspective, those 128 signatures represent 83 residential property owners with a total home value of $83,742,100, paying the Township of Verona a total of $1,417,466 in property taxes annually. Your residents, your constituents, are telling you they want Block 2205 Lot 6 to be open space. Please take the desires of this large group of Verona residents into consideration. If I had more than 3 days' notice to read through the dozens of pages of the report and appendices, synthesize the information, share it with my fellow concerned residents, let them know about tonight's meeting, and walk door to door to get additional signatures, the number of residents opposed to this development would be significantly higher. In conclusion, the HEFSP is not just a legal document. It is a reflection of Verona's planning values. If we want to promote responsible, inclusive, and equitable growth, then we must make decisions that respect neighborhood context, site constraints, and public input. I respectfully urge the planning board to, 1, remove 885 Bloomfield Avenue, Block 2205, Lot 6 from the HEFSP report. Number 2, incorporate the 2 fully accessible and 2 affordable housing units into a more suitable alternative already identified in the plan. 3, document the 2022 petition and the 2019 Township Manager email in the public record. 4, apply the protections of the steep slope ordinance fully and consistently. 5, reevaluate the vacant land adjustment process with greater scrutiny to ensure only viable properties are counted. 6, utilize the market to affordable strategy to supplement the township's affordable housing plan. And 7, advocate for a revised process that includes sufficient time for community feedback. Thank you for your attention to these critical matters and for your service to Verona.
Thank you. I have a couple of comments in response. Number one, the subcommittee that worked on this with Mr. Halvin toiled to find more vacant land. Number two, there were various arguments about steep slopes. No great shakes there. I'm a little disappointed that you didn't advocate on behalf of another property that's incredibly steep slope. That's included in this. Not one word about that. I would love to see that become open space as well. I think you're well aware that I voted no on the finding of that property as an area in need of redevelopment, and it felt very much like you were kind of just attacking the board. You also know that the time constraints are not of our choosing, it's the state requirement. It's, Dan, 10 days? No,
10
it's
days,
20 days, right?
10 days now.
10 days, that's it. And the time constraints, unfortunately, were placed on us by, I'm going to say, a very rushed process that every single municipality is right now scurrying to get through in no time. I know you keep nodding as if, too bad, like you should have done better. We have done, I can't tell you how many times I've met and with our subcommittee to get this to you and out there with as much time as possible. But
It's not enough time. It goes to the town council on the 23rd. And then it has to go, there's
It's
no time
due-
for public comment.
It's due on the 30th. And it's unfortunate that no towns have had enough time to formulate a more affable plan that would be, perfect for everyone. It's unfortunate that we can't force developers to put their property into the Green Acres program. The owners of the property themselves have to be a willing person to do that. From my understanding, does anybody have any comments on that?
No, I'm just wondering, well, first of all, thank you, Mrs. Correa, for the really thoughtful and thorough comments. So if we took Lot 6 off, right, as one of the properties, right, because of it's already restricted, it's not like we're talking a high volume of units are going to go there anyway. If we took it off the list, what substantive impact would that have?
Well, you'd have to come up with a replacement in a very short amount of time that wouldn't give us enough time to do noticing, and we'd miss the June 30th deadline and they'd sue.
So we need a replacement because it's contributing numbers.
Yes, exactly.
And you need those numbers replaced.
Right. We'd have to have the timing is, if we were to go back a few weeks, then theoretically, yes, we would have to find a project to replace it. But unfortunately, at this stage, it's difficult to do that today before the June 30th deadline. But as I mentioned, there's room for the township to amend its plan in a later date should a more suitable project come along.
Does anyone from our administration and or our planners have any answers or any comments to Ms. Gouet as to some of the points that she made?
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot. I'm sorry. There were a number of points, but I'll, I'm going to kind of keep it straightforward. The timeframe that every municipality had was painfully short, shorter than I think that we were subjected to in any other round. We just discussed that Verona had pretty much 8 years or so from when the numbers were, or when the third round started to when it adopted its plan. We only had 6 months essentially this time from when we knew what our number was to when we had to have the plan published for noticing. And that doesn't really allow for, it's not like a master plan where you could start well ahead of time and have a public input process where it's designed for a public input process. The housing plan, fourth round housing plan this time around was, purposely or not designed for public input. It was designed for efficiency from the perspective of having affordable housing plans done before the fourth round even started, so that units could be created during that fourth round period. So, something like 80 towns submitted a joint collective request to the state for an extension of their deadline based on the constrained time frame, and all 80 of them were rejected. Several of my towns requested extensions for legitimate reasons, and only one of them actually got an extension, possibly the only one in the whole state. So, Verona's in the same boat as every other town. We're trying to avoid subjecting ourselves to builders' remedy lawsuits and not given quite the time that we needed. Just a couple of comments on market to affordable and open space. Just a general statement, these require money. 4 units of a 4-unit market to affordable program requires at least $2 million just to acquire the units, and then whatever the other costs are. Reserving land for open space requires money as well, possibly in excess of, $8 million. I don't even know how much this land is valued, but that's just so you understand, the public understands that, these are great ideas. Having the buy-in to spend the money is kind of a whole other conversation. I think that's probably where I'll leave it.
I want to add one more thing, that the plans that you read through are concept plans, so unfortunately, they don't show engineering. I will agree that they look pretty crowded, regardless of the fact that they don't show where the stormwater management and how they're going to preserve and not cut into the steep slopes, and how they're not going to take the trees down on those slopes, which are all ordinances that this board has, stormwater included into our zoning code, and the steep slope ordinance as well. I only wish that everyone would uphold those. Unfortunately, this kind of housing can stomp all over some of that stuff. And if we don't adopt a plan, then we're going to get sued by everyone. And it's going to be much worse.
I want to chime in on that.
One other thing that Dan said, that this is a living document, and that what is potentially adopted this evening can morph wildly in the next 2 months before April 30. Is it August 30th?
Yes.
August 31st. So go ahead, Dan.
Yes, thank you. You made an important point that I think I just want to expand on for the public's education, which is that Michelle, the speaker, mentioned that, asked about engineering and stormwater plans. Why weren't those in the housing plan? And as you pointed out, these were concept plans. You don't get into that level of detail for a concept plan. No housing plan has those unless it's a already approved project, or a project that's already submitted documents to the planning board that you include in the housing plan as evidence. But as I previously stated, if this project were to move forward, it has to come before the board. They have to show that they're complying with stormwater management issues around steep. They have to provide the surveys that show whether these steep slopes are real and problematic, and then, you know, the borough, I keep saying borough, the township has the opportunity during negotiations and the development of a redevelopment plan or new zoning to figure out how you want to handle the steep slope issue if it's a real and substantial issue. So this is not, the fact that it's listed in this plan isn't automatically an approval for it. It's not going to just show up tomorrow. It still has to go through the normal process. It's still subject to state environmental standards and site design standards. So I just want to remind everybody that. Thank you.
Dan, thank you for hitting on the points I was going to hit on, and on those pieces. But I do just want to clarify and reiterate that this document does not allow anybody to build anything, right? The document sets that conceptual plan, but once again, every application has to come before the planning board or the zoning board, depending on what the variance is. And when this lot has been designated area in need of redevelopment before I was on the town council. And frankly, if it had come before me, I would have voted no on that being an area of in need of redevelopment. And that's one of the reasons I ran for office back in 2021, as you mentioned in your statement. But at the same point, once a property owner has property rights when they own something, the planning board can't designate something open space. That would be great if we could, right? We would have the greenest town ever. But you can't just say something because the property owner has to agree with that. The Township of Verona in the last decade has purchased a lot of open space and avoided the addition of hundreds and hundreds of more units by doing that, and lessen the impact on schools. I can't take credit for any of that because that was right before I got on the council. But I think they did a great job in mitigating that piece of it. But I think it is important to note that anything does get developed still has to go through traditional plans. Now, if we don't adopt this plan, then the builders remedy lawsuits happen, and that's when the builders don't have to follow our zoning. And that's really the nightmare scenario, because right now, because it's an area of redevelopment and the redevelopment plan has to be agreed to and so on, the township administration and our planners and our attorneys have the ability to mitigate some of the extent of that development. If there are a builder's remedy lawsuit, we don't have any options in that, right? One of the marvels of modern engineering that's also really not great for us is that because so much of the land that remains undeveloped has a steep slope now, right? Engineers are working diligently to find ways to build on steep slopes. So if you go into some cities, and the Dan that you brought up, or was I was talking to somebody about this, I can't remember who it was, but like they're putting buildings in places that we never would have conceptualized a building could have gone because of the structural engineering and geological engineering that exists in doing some of these things. And that's why we have the steep slope ordinances and things like that. But I'm just going to put a general comment. I agree with you on the timeline of this, Michelle, 100%. I hate it. We got hit with these numbers right at the beginning of the calendar year, right?
Right. We settled with fair share housing and
just a few months ago. Yeah. The settlement was in March, so really we only had since middle of March knowing what our numbers were.
Right. And we had to take Kevin and myself and our attorneys were on calls, with league of municipalities and things like that, going through strategy. And honestly, like everybody's kind of making up as go along, even in the court system. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy how this was set up. But as part of the actual development of this plan itself and the timeline, the plan couldn't be developed until the settlement was reached. And that puts you into March, and then a substantive plan has to be developed. And unfortunately, one of the consequences of that is, yes, it comes out later. But at the same point, if we didn't have a well thought out plan in this way, we could be in a kind of a disastrous situation. I will note for anybody who's concerned about the way that this is set up, the way to change this is the only way to change how a lot of this is done is through constitutional amendments, because affordable housing is considered a constitutional right in the state of New Jersey. And the legislative piece, the municipalities were not very well involved and represented in the process of creating this legislation. I can tell you that it is the leadership in the Senate, Nick Scutari and the Senate President, and the Assembly Speaker, who are pushing this, and Governor Murphy, and a lot of this was done in backroom deals, speaking of no transparency, right? And I've had one-on-one conversations at League of Municipalities with those leaders, and basically the response I get is, yeah, like, we don't care. You know, in a nice way, in a more political way, right? But they're basically like, housing is a constitutional right. But what they don't say is, yes, it is a constitutional right, but we actually could write much better legislation, and really spend some time thinking about that. But part of the issue is the state waited until the last minute and the next round was coming up, right? So, it's very frustrating on all of those areas. And I understand the need, especially when people live around a proposed development, the concerns that exist with that. And honestly, if you polled most people in Verona, I would say almost all of them would say they don't want a development right by their house, right? Because we like where we live and what we do. And frankly, I would like to keep the character of the town as it is, with some updates to make it a little bit more charming in the town center. But at the same point, we are really subject to the whims of a legislature that, in my opinion, is not really representing the needs of municipalities themselves. I know our elected representatives in LD 40 were not in favor of how this has gone down on the state level. But they can only do so much. Right now, there's control in the governor's office and in both houses of legislature that created this plan, that they applauded themselves for and lauded themselves for, that really, created a lot of questions and put us in a situation where we're a very dense town, we're a very developed town, and we have to develop more. It's highly concerning, and I agree with you 100%. And I would encourage you to reach out to Craig Coughlin, the Assembly Speaker, his office, Nick Scutari, the Senate President, Governor Murphy. I would get involved in the next election, because this is one of the big issues in the next gubernatorial election, and really try to see some change. But the only way to revise some of this is through a constitutional amendment to better define what affordable housing means as a right in the state of New Jersey, because that definition currently is by case law, right? And we don't have that constitutional case. So I appreciate you listening to my comments on that. And that goes through to your point as well with the market to affordable. I agree with Mr. Halvin's point that the finances of that can be prohibitive. But at the same point, just as you have brought up concern here about something happening in your neighborhood, the market to affordable would probably bring the same public reaction from various other neighborhoods if they knew that changeover was happening in their neighborhood. And the response, unfortunately, that we would get would be, well, put it somewhere else. Why? And we'd have people coming up here and saying, why aren't you putting it at 855, 885 Bloomfield Avenue? And that's the unfortunate consequence of having to fit a lot into a small town. So I feel for you 100%. You have my cell phone number, call me, we can talk about it, more and more. But unfortunately, I think in many ways our hands are tied by situations far out of our control. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
I have a process question. So maybe this is, I just want to understand the ability of a landowner or builder to seek remedy that's based on an unmet need, right? So for example, if these spaces were somehow accounted for elsewhere and then none of them were allocated to that property, then the owner would not be able to seek remedy. Is that correct?
Yes. So under the rules that we're currently operating, a builder or an interested party can can challenge the plan if it is seen as not complying with the Fair Housing Act, and that can include, you know, coming up with your own, making up numbers that you're going to hit, or just not providing the affordable housing numbers you're supposed to hit, having projects in there that aren't realistic. In the past, it used to be, hey, my property is available, and I'm on your plan, put me in there, but according to the statute, that's not allowed this time. We'll see how the courts go along with it. They're a little bit flaky on that.
Thank you.
Only other, oh, sorry, hon, you want to go? You want to say something?
If you
I
were
was just
about
going
to
to say, the
move on.
only other thing that I would add is that the DEP continues to step up tons of environmental regulation and enhancing and increasing stormwater and flood. And it doesn't seem like the two parts of our government care about each other. They continue to support sprawl and building everywhere, and they continue to basically relax the environmental laws that really should apply everywhere to accommodate affordable housing. You can't have it both ways. You have to be able to. So that's something else to speak to our legislators about, because we in New Jersey need to uphold those environmental laws. And I constantly see them being relaxed in regard to affordable housing, and it's really wrong. I'm sorry.
Thank you. First of all, just thank you for your bringing your very thoughtful and very thorough concerns here. Certainly share them. I certainly share all the concerns here, and it's a complicated issue to balance this out, what's right for the town, what's right for right now with what we have. But along the lines, I do want to understand so I can do the best thing. There's also a way of, it's almost like buying two of these credits, right? Like, how much is that to say, like, oh, that you put into an affordable housing fund?
Oh, yeah, so the paying, you mean talking about paying the township instead of providing?
Yes.
Creating those units? So that's not something that is allowed anymore. It was allowed in the past, which is why the redevelopment of the Spectrum 360 site paid toward the Verona Flats site. It's something used to be allowed, but a lot of towns were not actually making use of the money they were getting, and so the state elected not to. I guess they repealed it, the section of the act that allowed towns to take that money from the developer and use it elsewhere. So it used to would be around like $200,000 a unit, but that's no longer an option.
So it's not an option, and because I just thought I saw it in the deck was that that's one of the ways of formulating these numbers, but it's not.
No.
Okay. All right. That takes that off the table. Thank you.
So it was April 7th that the order from the judge was given that 155 units needed to be met before the vacant land
Right.
came out.
Yeah.
Would that be correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think we had been tossing around the vacant land. Up
So
to
that's
that point.
April 7th.
What's that?
I'm saying that,
April 7th is when the order was put out, right?
okay, so May, June, we've been squeezed unfairly.
Yeah. There's some towns that
Process
still
is
are waiting for
broken.
their order.
Yes, that's true.
There's some towns still waiting for their order.
Wow.
Is that right?
And they still have the right plan. Yeah.
Wow.
So, one of my towns got their order on May 19th.
So they have less than a month.
Yep, and they couldn't get an extension, most of these towns.
Yep, and they couldn't even get an
Even
extension.
though yeah. So just to your point of how, the system is not really designed right now for
Fairness.
transparency,
None of it. It's
well
not
thought out,
designed
yeah,
for
no.
it. It feels like it's just designed to make you bend over as a community and say, we have no choice.
Yeah, I mean, I think the state wanted to avoid the historical pattern of towns taking years to actually put their plans together, but, 6 months still not
Yeah.
great,
No,
especially when they're so strict on that date.
All right.
One other
Yeah.
question. So, and I understand this is a conceptual plan. There are no actual, plans on these, and they still have to meet some constraints. Let's just say any one of these properties, it's not viable.
Yeah.
Okay? Are we still on the hook for that number somewhere?
We have to replace the project.
We have to
Yeah.
replace the
Like,
project.
I mentioned this earlier.
I brought this up last
Yeah, you brought this up last time, right? So, yeah, so, and if that's the case, then there is no way to, there's no purchase out of that either.
No, you can't buy out of the town can't buy out of its numbers.
Okay.
No. Sorry. I realize now what you're asking about. That was something that used to be the regional contribution agreement.
Right.
Towns would spend money, send it to another town to create the units there. Yeah, that hasn't been allowed since 2008.
And in such, if something like that happens, are we able to, and particularly through this that we're considering, renegotiate with the developers and say, give us, 16% instead of, or 18% to find those units within?
Yeah, that's another one of those things where you probably have to spend money to get them. You basically have to provide an incentive to increase that set aside.
Okay. That is a possible lever in the future.
It is. I mean, there's options also in when you're doing redevelopment plans to negotiate higher set asides, but that's something that happens in the future. And then you'd have to amend your plan to reflect that change, whether it's a increase in the number of affordable units at a site or one not being viable.
And that might increase our taxes if we did that.
Thinking long-term.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments? From the board? Sure.
Thank you for coming forward, Michelle. And I would just say, to you and anybody, if any of these plans are submitted in front of the board, just, come and let your voice be heard, which I'm sure you're going to do anyway, because, we have seen other plans where developers have come in and we've been able to speak to them and try to make it fairer or better, or whatever word you want to use, for the residents. So if those plans on any of these sites come before us, it's a great meeting to attend.
Besides that, I always have something.
One hypothetical question.
Wait. Yeah, just hold on. This particular property that you're concerned about, this one property, but many of the others do not have their redevelopment plan drafted yet. Guess who does that? Not this board. The council does that. Well,
Not always.
not 100% of the time.
Well, with redevelopment,
The council passes it.
it's
How's
an
that?
ordinance, and it depends on who drafts it.
Yeah.
But in any event, to going back to what Dan has been saying very eloquently for the past hour and a half, is we are doing, given the limited resources, right, the limited time, this plan is the best we could do, and it's actually, in my opinion, I want to, a lot of members of the public who are listening to this, I want them to be aware that the planning board and the subcommittee worked really hard on this, and they've been very involved in trying to do what's best for the town. And the way this system is, it is not catered towards helping the municipality, unfortunately. So as our mayor also said, your best bet is talk to your legislator.
I have one more thing that you just reminded me of, which is that the township has, assuming that there's no challenge to the plan, it doesn't have to be amended, your deadline for adopting all of your redevelopment plans or any ordinances to actually implement the project in this plan is March 15th of 2026. So I'm just letting you all know that time frame. It's about 8 months.
And then there's, as you said, a 5-year kind of wellness check.
Look back, yeah, wellness check, perfectly said, yes. Yes.
Ms. Gray,
We're going to keep it short, but if you need, you're asking a hypothetical.
Okay, so I'm still focused on block 2205, lot 6, but hypothetically, if the township's stormwater management ordinance, whatever that exactly is called, and the steep slope ordinance do apply to that property, then when the property owner or developer comes to you asking to develop on that site, are you as a planning board able to say no?
Well,
I know it's a hypothetical, and I know it might not be easy to answer. I'm sorry.
The answer is most likely no. Because one, if there is a redevelopment plan in place, the redevelopment plan would likely supersede all ordinances, to whatever ordinances that the redevelopment plan determined needed to be superseded.
I disagree. You cannot override the DEP's requirement for stormwater management. Go ahead, Sam.
So going back to, it's a very hypothetical question. It's, at this point, we are looking at everything 100 feet, but if you'd like me to indulge, I can give you a quick response without getting too much into the detail, okay? So what this plan does, like what our ordinances do, is we set standards. So there'll be a minimum of whatever number of units, 2 or 4 of those will be affordable, okay? When a redevelopment plan is written, the redevelopment plan will put in some bulk standards, etc., with the understanding that they need to comply with the stormwater management regulations. They need to comply with whatever the DEP regulations are. So your redevelopment plan, although it's considered an ordinance, doesn't trump what, I thought I'm a loud mouth. So, so it doesn't trump, the state regulations, etc., etc. Now,
Which, to your point, is what the town's ordinance is codified.
That is correct. So going back to this, when it comes to you, the planning board, right? If they are saying there's no plan written for any of these sites except 320, which was supposed, we have a draft available. Anyway, going back to your point, right? If it is a redevelopment plan which is fully compliant, but it's not compliant with any of the DEP regulations, those absolutely matter, right? So if it's a fully, anything that comes to you, if it's fully compliant with all the ordinances, you are required to approve it. It's the same logic here. So right now we are speculating on something that is not even.
The question was hypothetically, would they
Right.
apply? Okay.
So
and hypothetically, they should apply, but the developer has many ways in which to get waivers from the DEP, and it does.
Disagree.
No, well, okay.
I'll
All right.
disagree because we don't have.
I'll give you 10 examples tomorrow.
Well, we don't have a mitigation plan in the Township of Verona.
Are you familiar with West Essex Highlands?
Yes, but
Okay.
the DEP,
Okay.
They-
Issued a waiver so
They-
that they can develop.
do you know why they
Well,
issued
but did they issue a waiver?
accordingly?
Hypothetically, they issued a waiver. Do the regulations apply? No, they got a waiver.
They didn't get a full waiver. What they got was, they put their paperwork in by a certain date,
But
and the
there's more to it.
DEP,
There's more to it.
I know, but
But
you're.
my answer to your question,
Was trying to be realistic, okay? Yes, it should apply, but will it ultimately apply? Probably not, in my opinion, okay? I mean, hypothetically, probably not, because there's a way to get around it, because the affordable housing and the inclusionary housing and the builders lobbies are so powerful in the state, and the legislature has not acted on behalf of the people like us in Verona, are like people in Caldwell or in Cedar Grove, and we'll go on and on. So they have ultimate power to build whatever they want to build, in my opinion. So should it apply? Absolutely. Will there be a lawsuit to say that our steep slope ordinance is too restrictive and does not allow affordable housing? Probably. Will we win? Flip a coin. That was my answer to your question.
But at this point, right, if we're still in control as to which properties we're considering, right, including. So knowing this property, and it's really, it has to be at the very bottom of the list and maybe not even feasible for this type of development. So knowing this, like my question is, why is it on the list? And are the units even that are being allocated to it even realistic because of the limitations of the property? And should we not be looking at whatever else is in town to make that, to make up the difference?
The reality of the question has to do again with builders' remedy lawsuits.
But that was my earlier question, is that if they were not included initially, then they can't seek remedy because they're not.
Sure they can. They can say that the plan doesn't comply. Any developer can argue, Dan, correct me, right? Any development can argue that there's non-compliance.
For any piece of land.
On well, that our plan does not meet the requirements of the state. That developer has been in front of this board. That developer, is certainly familiar with this process and certainly has a desire to develop that property. So,
Any more comments? You have a comment? It's still public comment, right?
Well, I wasn't sure, but now that I see a hand up.
Paul Petrangeli, Verona. Sorry, I had a softball game, but obviously it was canceled. I just want to reiterate what the attorney said, just because I work in this industry. Developers are ready to go. They basically have all the power and true transparency, like the mayor says. Basically, these developers basically hold the keys and they write the rules, the records the state passes down. So if you want anything changed, you got to go to your legislator, because honestly, they don't care about your schools. They don't care about your sustainability in your town. The state cares about one thing, and that's affordable housing. Everything else is back shelf with us. We're a small town. We want little development, but the state doesn't care. So if you want change, you got to take it to the next level. I was at a meeting last night in Glen Rock, and it's the same exact meeting I'm here now. Same exact meeting. There's municipalities all over the state that are going crazy trying to get this plan adopted. If we do not adopt a plan, then a developer can challenge, and they can come in here ready to go, and your steep slope ordinance means nothing, because I'm sorry, the DEP and all that stuff, these developers have more money, and they get waivers very easily. So I'd like to say great job on the plan, and remember, it can be changed, remedied, or adjusted, everything. It's just to get this so we can't have developers come in, because that's the whole thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Kevin Ryan, Verona, New Jersey. Just to provide a little historical perspective, I was very much involved in the third round negotiations. I had spent 10 years on the Verona Town Council, just for background information for the folks here. And as Mr. Macera rightly pointed out, these are concept plans, okay? They are a long way from fruition. I just wanted to compliment you on, I did actually read the entire thing that you posted, and it's very thorough, and for the most part, very accurate. Whatever you put in there was accurate. But there's a lot of nuance that you couldn't put in there regarding the third round. Spectrum was one of them. Spectrum plan was approved in 2021, and it's still out there, okay? So if that gives you any solace, these things don't work all that quickly. The other thing was, you indicated like the third round was 2015 to, okay. That's a little misleading, because number one, as was pointed out in your report, the Council on Affordable Housing was a mess. We were told by our prior consultants at the time that we were in compliance with the adjustment. Primarily, there was dispute over the senior housing. Okay, so they took away a lot of our numbers that we were gotten credit for. Our prior attorneys basically kept telling us, you're in compliance, you're in compliance. But to the prior gentleman's point, there's always the courts. We were forced into doing a lot of stuff because we had builders' remedy lawsuits filed by 3 or 4 different developers. I wouldn't name them all, and I know you guys got a lot of work to do here. But you really don't want to get into the court system. You want to try to stay away from them as much as possible. Stop shaking your head at me, Madam Chairman, please, okay?
I'm going, of course we don't want to go into the court systems. I wasn't shaking my head. I was like, kind of giving you the, of course that's what we want.
Okay. I'm not saying this for you, but I'm trying to educate the people who don't normally get deeply involved in this, okay? Mm-hmm. So basically, you don't want to get into the court system because, as the prior gentleman pointed out, the developers do have all the money. They have a lot of clout with the legislators. Like it or not, money talks in our system. So I would encourage you, if you're dissatisfied, to go ahead, contact your legislators, contact the governor. There might be a new governor, or there will be a new governor, and who knows what position that person's going to take. So, then that's been a problem with this whole process. They're constantly moving the goalposts. Every round, you get a different philosophy, you get a different interpretation. These folks are all volunteers here. They're donating their time and their energy to try to come up with the best possible plan to save Verona. During the last round, we did take a lot of property out of consideration. We took huge chunks of we used a lot of money to go open space, down by Commerce Court, down by where the recycling center is. That's in Green Acres now. We took land over by the Afterglow section that abuts the Eagle Rock Reservation. Somebody wanted to develop over there. We took the money and we bought property there and put it into Green Acres. The problem is now I think we're running out of places even to put into Green Acres. So basically, give them a little understanding. I know the process is frustrating, and basically I think they're going to do the best they can to, weigh the needs of the town versus the concerns that you brought up. And thank you for expressing the views of the folks in your side of town. You did a great job. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. Seeing none, I still don't have one. I am closing public comment.
And I believe we should proceed to the next step. So the state sent out this? Is that?
No, that's a resolution that the Affordable Housing Council group.
Okay.
Formally.
Would that be the state?
No, that's our council.
Oh, okay.
No, I did not. The DCA has a form.
Okay.
This is a modification of that form, just with more detail.
Okay.
Specific to Verona.
Thank you. Has everybody seen this and read through it? Any issues with any of the verbiage? Yes.
And then the motion of the resolution.
Oh, so what we do need first is a motion to vote on this resolution?
No, to vote on the
On
housing
the
element. The
housing.
I make a motion to vote to adopt the housing plan.
Adoption of this, right, exactly.
We're voting on the adoption of it.
Right, the housing
This
element
is-
and the fair share plan of the master plan.
So we're
You're voting to approve it, and then you're going to approve the resolution that
Second, okay.
approved it.
All right. So I am now entertaining a motion to adopt the fourth round fair share plan.
So moved.
Mr. Katsap makes the motion. Can I get a second? I'll second it. Roll call, please.
Mr. Katsaf,
Yes.
Mr. Lilly,
Yes.
Mr. Hyman,
Before I vote, I just want to make a statement. I was on the master plan subcommittee that worked on this. I want to commend Dan and Ms. Siobhan for working with us on this plan, spending a lot of time, and also our counsel, Mr. Platchek. We had several meetings, hours long, working out the vacant land adjustment, which again, I thought Dan did a fantastic job, very comprehensive, and put us in a really good position. A lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of arguments.
What do you say?
That being said, having worked on the plan, am I happy with it? No. Frankly, I'm not a fan, but given where we are and the requirements we have to adopt it, we really don't have a choice. We have to adopt it, otherwise we lose our immunity. And really, the thing that I'm most disappointed on is the process. Yes, it was rushed, but we did have more time. We didn't use it effectively. We knew our number in October. Dan was working hard on the vacant land adjustment preliminarily. That number was confirmed, but even then, there just was not enough coordination and communication where we can be proactive about it. And now it's up to further negotiation. But that being said, I'm voting in favor of the plan.
Mr. Committee,
Yes.
Township Manager O'Sullivan,
Yes.
Mayor Tamboro,
Yes.
An unhappy yes.
Chair Pearson.
Also unhappy, yes. And I do want to thank Dan and San, our administration, namely Mr. O'Sullivan, and of course, my counterpart on the subcommittee with whom he argued. I think that's what he was referring to, but good arguments that actually gave us better traction on this, and the mayor. So my answer is an unhappy yes.
I'm just going to take a point of privilege here. I would like to thank our chairperson for an extraordinary amount of work behind the scenes on this as well, pointing out other land, really delving in. Other than I think our attorney and our planners, and maybe Mr. Hyman, there's nobody that knows more about land use in this town than Jessica Pearson. And I thank you for your leadership on this as well, both in public, but also at the many subcommittee and meetings and all the work behind the scenes. For those of you who don't know, Ms. Pearson's practically a full-time employee of the town who gets a $0 salary. And she's about the best value that we have in government. So thank you, Chairwoman.
Thank you. So the motion passes? The motion passes, I think 8-0.
Unhappy 8-0. And now everybody has read the resolution. This resolution will be forwarded to the town council, I assume. Okay, so say that again?
The resolution,
You want to?
the action is the vote, the resolution technically is the memorialization. So now we're going to vote on the resolution.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution, the memorializing resolution as drafted.
Okay.
Second.
Mr. Hyman moves, Mayor seconds. Can we get a roll call?
Mr. Katsaf,
Yes.
Mr. Lilly,
Yes.
Mr. Hyman,
Yes.
Mr. Kamudi,
Yes.
Township Manager O'Sullivan,
Yes.
Mayor Tamboro,
Yes.
Vice Chair Freshy,
Yes.
Chairperson Pearson.
Yes. The motion passes. The motion passes, and
We will sign that tonight and get it to the council for their Monday meeting.
I think there's somebody here that has new business that missed. Just new business.
Oh.
That's not on the agenda.
Yeah.
Asking for, he missed it, just.
Okay, so we have one request to open for public, for something that was not on the agenda this evening, that had nothing to do with it.
Is there somebody here from Mr. Agostino's firm? Okay, you can come up, please, thank you.
This has everything to do with this.
With this application? No,
Yes.
It doesn't have anything to do with it at all. No.
With this,
No.
not with this
No.
plan? Okay.
No, it's entirely
Just want to make sure.
We need to make a motion to allow, a
Yes.
change in the order of business to allow.
Thank you. You're correct. Hold on a second. Does anyone want to make a motion to reopen general public comment?
It's not public comment.
What is
New,
it?
it's new business not on the agenda.
It's new business that's not on the agenda,
Okay.
and the gentleman failed to realize it was his opportunity earlier.
Okay.
Okay.
So I'll make a motion to permit an amendment of the agenda to allow this new business.
Okay.
Second.
It's seconded by Mr. Freshy. Voice vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone not in favor? Thank you. It passes.
Thank you, John Eder of Agostino Taylor. I'm here to request an extension request for the One Sunset Valley Avenue site.
Can you please repeat that? You're here to request what?
An extension request, an extension resolution for the One Sunset Avenue site.
You want a copy of the resolution that we passed?
Yes.
An extension of approvals.
No, he wants
right?
you're requesting a copy of the resolution.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Kathleen, be happy to give the copy of the resolution.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can
That's
furnish you with a copy of that resolution. We passed that 2 meetings ago, I think.
Yes,
The last
that's all.
meeting.
Yeah, that's all.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. Yeah, sorry. Do we, all right, is there any other new business?
Motion to close. Motion to adjourn.
Mr. Katsov makes the motion to adjourn. Mr. Fresky seconds. All members, aye.
Aye.
Motion approved. Yeah.
We know how many 2 hours. I missed you too, because I still have 2 on Oh, okay. That's fine. Yeah, you want
You didn't know what, even though I knew what I was talking about.
You know what? I'm sorry.
It's just